Chapter 32, ch 29. Titan Drive. Another week passed. Perhaps because Natasha and her team could not find any trace of Dr. Connors for a long time, Nick Fury did not want to waste any more time. There was a high possibility that they would get no results if they continued to search, so he let Natasha and her team evacuate New York City. It is also worth mentioning that a major event happened in the Osborn Group during this week. A fire broke out in the laboratory of the Osborn Group one night. Fortunately, the fire was put out in time by the fire brigade. Except for some research materials and equipment being burned, there were no other casualties. This fire was not an accident, but was caused by Hydra, which was sent by Pierce to the Osborn Group to steal Dr. Connors' research data. After you carefully confirmed that no S.H.I.E.L.D. agents were found in New York City, Peter planned to put on his uniform again tonight to deal with Kingpin. According to U's intelligence, the kill order from Kingpin has not been withdrawn. If he doesn't give Kingpin a little thanks, wouldn't he seem to be easy to bully? The reason why he didn't dare to provoke Kingpin before was because he was afraid of his heavy firepower. The shield of the Iron Pilot armor can only block light weapons such as bullets, but it will not be able to withstand 1 or 2 hits from heavy weapons. But now that he has the Titan mecha, he is no longer afraid of heavy weapons. In addition, with the Titan's powerful firepower, he is not afraid of being beaten up by a group. Peter must kill Kingpin tonight, and even that black egg Nick Fury can't stop him. Following the instructions, Peter came to the place where Yu had discovered that Kingpin lives. Looking at the manor covering several kilometers in front of him, Peter said to himself that he was not jealous. Although this was in the suburbs of New York City, it would still cost a lot of money to build such a manor. One could imagine how much money Kingpin had made after becoming the king of the underground world. Peter enabled the stealth mode and walked towards the manor. Arriving at the gate of the manor, Peter released the stealth mode looking at the 3 or 4 meter long iron gate in front of him. With a thought, he selected the Titan model and summoned the Titan mecha. Come out, flame. Peter saw a blue wormhole with a diameter of about 10 meters appear in the sky above his head. The next second, a Titan mech about 7 or 8 meters high fell from the blue wormhole and hit the ground with a loud noise. Immediately after the flame landed on the ground, a blue protective shield protected it. The shield would exist for a while to protect the Titan mech before the pilot entered the cabin. The Titan mecha made such a loud noise that the guards in the manor were alarmed. At a glance, they found that the Titan mecha was taller than the iron gate. They immediately sounded the alarm, and the entire manor went into alert status. Kingpin was sleeping with Vanessa in the villa of the manor. When he heard the alarm, he immediately opened his eyes and tensed his muscles. He grabbed the crutches beside the bed and quickly glanced around. When he found no danger, he breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, Vanessa, who was already asleep, was also awakened by the alarm. She opened her eyes blearily and looked at the man beside her. What happened to Wilson? Kingpin looked at Vanessa tenderly, lifted her hair from her eyes and said softly, "It's okay, just continue to sleep. I'll take care of it." Hearing what Wilson said, Vanessa nodded, closed her eyes and went to sleep with peace of mind. She believed that Wilson could handle it and he would never let her down. After all, her man had climbed up to his current status step by step from an ordinary gangster. Kingpin gave Vanessa one last gentle look, then walked out of his room with his crutches. The moment he stepped out of the door, Kingpin's face changed and he returned to his usual cold and ruthless look. For Kingpin, his tenderness would only be reserved for Vanessa. Kingpin looked at the panicked man in front of him. With a cold face he grabbed his collar and lifted him in front of him. What's going on? Why is the alarm sounding? The man who was lifted up by Kingpin felt difficulty to breath and came to his senses. He immediately told Kingpin what the guard at the manor gate reported. Lord Kingpin, someone has invaded the manor, and the invader has a big robot. When Kingpin heard this, his first reaction was that this guy was lying to him, but when he saw the photo of the robot on the guy's phone, he believed that the invader did have a robot. Kingpin threw the man aside, then picked up the radio next to the door and started giving orders. Everyone, take out all the heavy weapons from the warehouse and destroy the robot at all costs. Don't let it get close to my villa. After saying that, Kingpin put the radio directly into his pocket, took out his mobile phone and contacted Bullseye. Bullseye, immediately have your men bring heavy weapons to my estate in the suburbs of New York City as quickly as possible. All right, I will come right away. After receiving Kingpin's order, Bullseye didn't ask the reason. He just had to carry out the order obediently. At that time, at the gate of the manor, Peter had already learned about the movements in the manor through the honeycomb drone. He jumped onto the head of the Flame Titan and entered the cockpit of the Flame Titan through the passage on the top. The Titan Mecha cockpit after the system modification is different from the one in the game. The modified cockpit does not have any buttons or screens, only a chair. As soon as Peter sat on the chair, a connecting wire was connected from the back of the chair to the back of the helmet. The picture displayed on the helmet switched to the view of the Titan Mecha. At the same time, Peter felt that his body seemed to have become much heavier, as if he had turned into a Titan Mecha. He could control the Titan Mecha with just his thoughts. So to test it out, Peter controlled the Flame Titan to make a jet sprint and used his shoulder to slam into the large iron gate in front of him. The 3 or 4 meter long iron gate was deformed and flew out under the impact of the Flame Titan, randomly killing an unlucky guy behind the gate. Seeing the huge robot rushing into the manor, one of the guards reacted and immediately shouted loudly, "Fire! Fire!" Immediately afterwards, the guards at the gate raised their guns and started shooting at the Flame Titan. The bullets hit the body of the Flame Titan, splashing sparks and making a series of crisp metal collision sounds. Although the firepower looked very strong, these people were using light weapons such as rifles and pistols, which could not cause any damage to the Titan mecha. At most, they would just scratch the paint, and not even a bullet mark could be left on the Titan. Since all damages would be repaired each time the weapon was retracted, Peter stood there and let them shoot for a while to see how well the Titan mecha defended. Now that the test was completed, it was time to get rid of them. Chapter 33, ch 30. Flame Titan's power? Haha, come here you fuckers. Let me send you to sleep. Under Peter's control, a metal can was ejected from the Flame Titan's arm. The metal can fell into the crowd and quickly released a dark green gas around it, directly covering the area within a 10-meter radius of the metal can. Then the Flame Titan raised the T-203 thermite launcher in his hand and shot it towards the dark green gas. The thermite grenade instantly burned after it hit the ground, and the dark green gas emitted by the metal tank also instantly exploded. The scorching flames instantly made the guards feel Peter's power. Under the high temperature of thousands of degrees, they turned into ashes without even having time to scream. Seeing more than a dozen of their companions turned into ashes in front of them, all the guards' pupils shrank. One of the guards shouted to his companions, "Stay away from that tank, it contains flammable gas." There was no need for the guard to remind them, as they had all seen what had just happened. They were not fools and naturally understood that they should stay away from the metal can. In order to prevent the situation from happening again, they all dispersed and did not gather together as they did at the beginning. But even if they knew, what would it matter? Except for the people on the edge who were lucky enough to escape from the range of the dark green gas, it was impossible for others to escape in 1 or 2 seconds even if they ran for their lives. Peter showed a disdainful expression as he looked at the people dispersing. Did they think that he had no other way? Burning trap? Peter said, and 15 metal cans shot out from the oval arm guards on his arms. After falling to the ground, the 15 metal cans directly covered a distance of 100 meters. The guards felt despair when they saw the dark green gas around them. Some of them even collapsed, dropped their guns, knelt down and kowtowed to Peter, begging for mercy. After all, within this 100-meter range, except for those at the edge, most people can't run out at all. Facing those people's pleas for mercy, Peter was totally unmoved. In fact, there was a smile on his face. He controlled the Flame Titan and swung his left hand forward. A piece of burning thermite shot out from his arm and directly ignited the dark green gas. In an instant, the whole view was filled with burning flames. Most of the guards at the door were killed by Peter's attack, and only 5 who were lucky enough were still alive. After taking a glance at the 5 guards who had completely lost their fighting spirit, Peter smiled evilly and moved towards them. Thud, thud, thud. Every time he moved a heavy sound was produced, which made the 5 guards tremble in fear. Coming in front of them, Peter raised his hand and a blade came out of it, making a sound, sending chills to the guard's spine. Swing? So are you ready to meet the god? Peter said, and with a wide swing, cut the 5 guards in half. After killing them, he withdraws the blade back and moved towards Kingpin's villa. Just after walking a few meters, Peter encountered a group of people blocking the way again. This time the guards were different from those at the gate. They were holding heavy weapons. When they saw Peter driving the Flame Titan, they attacked him without hesitation. At once, more than 10 rockets with white tails flew towards the Flame Titan, and dozens of grenades also flew towards it. The rest was a heavy machine gun that was shooting heavy bullets towards it. Thermal shield? Looking at the attacks flying towards him, Peter calmly controlled the Flame Titan and stretched out his left hand. A shield made of flames ejected from his palm and blocked the attacks. The rockets, grenades, and heavy machine gun bullets were instantly burned up when they hit the thermal shield. This intensive attack did not hurt the Flame Titan at all and was all blocked by the thermal shield. What the fuck? Take out the anti-tank missiles and fire after the shield disappears. I don't believe that the armor of this robot can be as thick as a tank. When the guards saw that all their attacks were blocked by the shield, they immediately started discussing countermeasures with their companions. Peter naturally knew what they were thinking. They wanted to wait for the moment his thermal shield disappeared and then concentrate their fire to kill him. However, this did not mean that Peter had no solution. The moment the thermal shield was removed, the Flame Titan put the thermite launcher in his hand behind his back and hammered the ground with his fists. Flame core? There was a loud bang, and countless thermites were released from the Flame Titan's arms. A fan-shaped shock wave mixed with countless burning thermites flew towards the guards in front. In the blink of an eye, the fan-shaped shock wave covered an area of 400 to 500 meters in front of the Flame Titan, which was completely different from the small area in the game. The defense line carefully prepared by Kingpin was completely useless, and all the guards and heavy weapons were burned to ashes by Peter's attack. At the same time, Kingpin's face on the second floor of the villa was illuminated red by the fire not far away. Kingpin's face was extremely ugly. He didn't expect that the enemy was so terrifying. It could cover such a large area with one strike. It didn't look like a product of this era at all. It was like future technology. Kingpin knew that he could not stop this enemy at all, and there was a high probability that he would die here today. But even so, he had to protect Vanessa. For Kingpin, Vanessa is the most important person in the whole world, and even if something happens to him, he will still protect her with his life. Kingpin turned and looked at his most trusted man. Take Vanessa away from here. From now on, Vanessa's orders will be like my orders. King has great trust in this man. He was rescued and raised by him since childhood. Kingpin believes that this man will not betray him, that's why he is very confident in letting him protect Vanessa. Okay, but boss, won't you leave with us? The man looked at Kingpin in confusion, not understanding why he won't leave with them. Those guards could still hold on for a while, enough for Kingpin to escape as well. No, his target is me. If I go with him, Vanessa will be in danger, so just take Vanessa with you. Kingpin knew that the enemy's target was him. If he ran away with Vanessa, he would be harming her. Then take care of yourself, boss. The man made a last reluctant look at Kingpin, then ran towards Vanessa's room. While the two were talking, Peter had already driven the Flame Titan to break through the last line of defense and was less than 500 meters away from Kingpin's villa. At this time, Peter could clearly see Kingpin on the balcony on the second floor of the villa, and Kingpin could also see the entire appearance of the Flame Titan. Seeing that the paint on the body of the Flame Titan had not fallen off much, Kingpin understood that the combat power of both sides was not at the same level at all. No wonder his men were defeated so quickly. Through the honeycomb drone, Peter knew that there were not many guards around Kingpin, so he let you take over the Flame Titan. He opened the cockpit with a thought and jumped off the Flame Titan. Chapter 34, ch 31. Kingpin's death. Seeing Peter coming out of the Flame Titan, Kingpin showed a look of surprise on his face. He never expected that the driver of this robot would be him. It's you, Super Soldier. Yes, it's me, Kingpin. This should be the first time we meet, but I think this will be the last time we meet. Peter slowly walked towards Kingpin. With a thought, a superluminal alpha blade appeared in his right hand, and a seemingly ordinary little pistol appeared in his left hand. The seemingly ordinary little pistol in Peter's hand at this time is the official self-aiming smart pistol given to players in the game. As long as the target is locked, you can shoot at will. When the bullet is fired out of the barrel, it will always track the target to achieve a 100% hit rate. Looking at the guards who kept running out of the villa, Peter held the smart pistol in his hand casually. With the incredible power of the smart pistol, every bullet accurately hit a guard. Peter arrived in front of the villa very easily as if he was taking a stroll. He put the smart pistol into the holster on his waist and jumped directly to the second floor balcony. Looking at the man in front of him holding a cane, he attacked without saying a word. Although Kingpin's huge body looks very bulky, it is actually all solid muscles. Facing the orange-red laser sword in Peter's hand, Kingpin dared not resist at all and could only keep dodging. However, Kingpin knew that it was only a matter of time before he would be hit. Kingpin leaped back several meters, pointed the cane in his hand at Peter, with a ferocious expression on his face. Super Soldier, die. A red laser shot out from the cane in Kingpin's hand. Kingpin was holding the cane not for its good looks, but as a disposable laser launcher disguised as a cane, which could be used at such times to catch the enemy off guard. If an ordinary person faced Kingpin's sudden attack, he would definitely not be able to react in time. Unfortunately, Kingpin's opponent was Peter. The moment the laser shot out from the crotch, Peter reacted and used the super light speed alpha battle blade in his hand to directly block the laser. Kingpin, if you have any tricks, use them now, or you won't have a chance. And don't call me Super Soldier, such an ugly name. Please call me Iron Pilot. As soon as he finished speaking, Peter rushed towards Kingpin again. Hearing Peter's words, Kingpin smiled bitterly in his heart. The laser on the cane in his hand was Kingpin's last resort. Now he had no other means at all. It seemed that he would really die tonight at the hands of the Super Soldier, no, the Iron Pilot. Even if he felt he had no chance to survive, Kingpin still wanted to let his enemy know how powerful he was before he died. Kingpin's clothes suddenly became tight, and then they broke into pieces the next second, revealing the strong muscles that Kingpin had been hiding under his clothes. Die! Kingpin shouted angrily and swung the cane in his hand towards Peter as if it were a sword. Peter and Kingpin passed each other, and then Kingpin felt a heat on his neck. His vision then spun around, and he saw a familiar headless body appear in front of him. Blood gushed out from the neck of the headless body like a fountain, gradually dyeing Kingpin's vision bright red. Before losing consciousness, Kingpin realized that the headless corpse was his own. His eyes felt heavier and heavier, and it turned out that he had been beheaded. Before his death, Kingpin was still thinking about Vanessa. He didn't know whether his man had taken Vanessa away from New York. He believed that Vanessa had the money he left for her. Although she might not be rich in the second half of her life, she should have no problem living a wealthy life for the rest of her life. Looking at the headless body of Kingpin, Peter smiled. The boss had been defeated, and now it was time to reap the spoils. Peter moved his mind and put the superluminal alpha battle blade into the system space, and began to search Kingpin's villa. Just as Peter was looting, you reminded him that many people had entered the manor through the gate, and they were all carrying weapons. It seemed that they had ill intentions. It must be the reinforcements called by Kingpin. These reinforcements were the ones that Kingpin had called for by Bullseye earlier. It was estimated that Kingpin himself did not expect that he would die so soon, and the reinforcements arrived after he died. Peter tore off the door of the safe in front of him with one punch. You, just control the Flame Titan to get rid of them? If you can't solve them, contact me again. Okay. After replying to Peter, you controlled the Flame Titan and rushed towards Bullseye and his men. Soon, explosions mixed with gunshots continued to sound outside the villa, and even the house seemed to shake from time to time. Less than a minute later, Yu's voice rang in Peter's ears again. Peter, those people have all been dealt with. Oh, really? Thank you for your hard work, Yu. Peter was a little surprised to hear that Yu had dealt with the reinforcements so easily. Although he did not see how many reinforcements there were, they must be more than the guards of the entire manor before, otherwise, how could Kingpin place his hopes on those people? Yu has already dealt with them, so he has to speed up here too. Although Kingpin's manor is in the suburbs, the noise here is so loud that any New York City policeman who is not deaf can hear it, so it is estimated that the police will arrive soon. 10 minutes later, after Peter took out the things in the last safe, he was ready to leave. He turned on the stealth mode and a surge of adrenaline rushed into his chest. He jumped from the second floor, hooked the front with a grappling hook in the air and performed a second acceleration, completely defying physics by performing a movement used in the world of Titanfall, the bunny hop. Note, bunny hopping is a method of high-speed movement that utilizes the characteristics of the Titanfall game engine. It is called bunny hopping because it requires jumping the instant you land, and it hops like a rabbit. Peter discovered the ability to apply the bunny hop to real life some time ago when he was bored. This was the first time he had applied the bunny hop in practice, but as a veteran player, he mastered it very quickly. After becoming familiar with the bunny hop, Peter's speed gradually increased. Many vehicles on the road were left behind by Peter. The surrounding scenes flashed by Peter's eyes like after images. If his dynamic strength had not been enhanced, Peter would have crashed into a car long ago. Just as Peter was about to enter New York City, he saw the police driving past him. With such efficiency, it was no wonder that the police arrived at the scene only slowly after the bad guys were caught. If he were a taxpayer, he would definitely not like this dilatory policeman. Chapter 35, ch 32. Gwen's shock the next morning at breakfast. The news of Kingpin's death was reported on the morning news, but it was not reported as Kingpin's underground emperor of New York City, but as the big entrepreneur and philanthropist Wilson. Aunt May looked at the news on TV and said with a worried look on her face, "This kind of murder actually happened in New York City. Ben and Peter, you two must be careful when you go out." "May, don't worry. I will be careful when I go out, but I feel that New York City has become more and more dangerous in recent years. Recently, there have always reports on TV that people have been killed at night. If our house was not here, I would consider moving to a safer city. Uncle Ben has a deep understanding of the security environment in New York City in recent years. If his house wasn't here, he would have moved away long ago." "I understand, Aunt May," Peter responded, but he felt speechless in his heart, because what Uncle Ben said was completely done by himself. If Uncle Ben knew that he did those things, he would definitely scold him severely and maybe even teach him a lesson. However, even if Tony hadn't come back to beat up New York City, the peaceful life before would be gone forever. All kinds of monsters would appear in New York, and whether ordinary people could survive would depend on their luck. After breakfast, Peter returned to his room and turned on his computer. Looking at the map of Afghanistan on the computer, all the areas explored by the Hive UAV were marked in red. At this time, the red area on the map occupied almost half of the entire map. It would not take long to find Tony. However, even if Peter finds Tony in advance, he will not go there immediately, but will wait until Tony has almost built the Mark I suit before setting off for Afghanistan. If he goes out before Tony has built the Mark I, there may not be a subsequent Mark series, and Iron Man will not appear. You know, among all the superheroes, his favorite is Iron Man. If Peter is in Marvel and Iron Man disappears because of his mistake, he will be in tears. Another point is that without Iron Man, wouldn't he have one less person to show off to in the future? Then Peter closed the map of Afghanistan and opened the backend of his company's official website. Looking at the number of more than 2.8 billion paying users around the world on the computer, a smile appeared on Peter's face. He did not expect that his wish of becoming a billionaire would be fulfilled so soon. Peter took into account the consumption capacity of different countries, so the pricing for different countries is different. Therefore, the money earned is not simply the number of buyers multiplied by 10. However, even so, Peter still earned more than $1 billion. Peter used most of the $1 billion to buy shares of Stark Group, leaving only $10 million plus the money he looted from Kingpin's family yesterday as a reserve. Because of Tony's disappearance, the price of Stark Group's stock has been getting lower and lower every day. A large number of retail investors even sold their stocks at a loss, and all those stocks were pocketed by Peter. Now Peter owns 3% of the shares, making him a small shareholder in Stark Group. And once Tony is rescued, it will be possible to increase these shares to more than 10% through further operations. Snap! The door that Peter had locked suddenly opened. Hearing the sound of the door lock, Peter immediately used the speed he had in his previous life when he was about to be discovered for watching porn. He instantly closed the web page and switched to the normal page. "Gwen, why are you here?" When Peter turned around and found that the person coming in was Gwen, he felt relieved. After entering Peter's room, Gwen sat on Peter's bed very casually, without any sense of formality, as if she was at home. Gwen took out her phone and clicked a few times, then turned the screen towards Peter and asked seriously, "Peter, tell me, did you do this?" Gwen's phone screen showed the news that Kingpin had been killed. Looking at the news on the screen, Peter nodded in acknowledgement. "Yes, I was the one who killed Kingpin yesterday." "What's wrong, Gwen? Is there any problem?" Gwen looked at Peter in disbelief. "It was really you, Peter. How on earth did you manage to defeat so many people?" Looking at the news footage, there were a lot of guns and even heavy weapons on the ground. You weren't hurt, were you? Gwen said as she walked straight up to Peter and began to touch him up and down with a worried look on her face. Okay, I'm fine. Peter felt very itchy when Gwen touched his hand, and stopped Gwen's hand with a smile. Then Peter asked you to upload the video shot last night with the Hive drone to the computer for playback. Before starting to play it, Peter specifically reminded Gwen that the scene might be very bloody, so she should be mentally prepared in advance. After that, he pressed the play button and started to play it from the flame titan he summoned. When Gwen saw that Peter actually summoned such a huge mecha out of thin air, her mouth opened wide, and a shocked expression appeared on her little face. She looked at Peter as if he were an alien. Peter, tell me you are not an alien? This is not a technology that humans on Earth can possess. I will believe you even if you tell me it is magic. Peter smiled and said, this is nothing. There will be more surprises for you in the future. If Gwen can't accept it now, then if he comes up with something even more unscientific in the future, won't Gwen's worldview collapse? Gwen rolled her eyes at Peter and continued watching the video. However, after watching for a while, Gwen's face turned pale and she quickly turned off the video. The video was too bloody and violent, and Gwen couldn't bear to watch it at all. Gwen calmed herself down, then looked at Peter and asked, Peter, how many people did you kill last night? Although Gwen herself adheres to the philosophy of not killing, she does not ask others to do the same as herself. Just like after Gwen knew that Peter was the pilot and understood that he had killed many people, she did not question Peter why he killed people, because everyone has different philosophies, and she just needs to stick to her own philosophy. There were too many people, probably more than 100. With so many people blocking him last night, it was naturally impossible for Peter to count them one by one. Anyway, those people did a lot of bad things under Kingpin's order. If they were in a country with the death penalty, they would have been shot several times. Such scum was not worth his attention at all. Chapter 36, ch 33. Tony's location? Gwen was surprised to hear that Peter had killed so many people last night. The number of people Peter killed last night was several times more than she had expected. However, Gwen estimated that Peter might have killed even more people last night. Judging from the weapon debris all over the ground, there must have been a lot of guards protecting Kingpin in the manor last night. Peter, since Kingpin is dead, the killing order should have disappeared as well, right? Does that mean I can continue to be a ghost spider at night? Gwen looked at Peter expectantly. Not being able to go out as a ghost spider at night made Gwen very bored at home. With Kingpin being killed, the hunting order he issued was naturally lifted. To be precise, even if there is a wanted order, those people would not care. After all, after Kingpin was killed, those gangsters were busy seizing power and territory, wanting to become the next underground emperor of New York City. They would not have the energy to care about that damn wanted order. The previous hunting order was effective because Kingpin was still alive, and it was only executed under the pressure of Kingpin's power. The hunting order has naturally become invalid with the death of Kingpin, but Gwen, if you want to go out as Ghost Spider at night, you should be careful. It's best to go with me. Because with the death of Kingpin, other gangs are very crazy. They even started fighting early this morning, and they will be even more unscrupulous at night. Peter said this and asked you to play the video of the fight between two gangs in the morning for Gwen to watch. After watching the video, Gwen was surprised. She didn't expect these gangsters to be so bold. They simply didn't take the law and the police seriously. Gwen even saw several innocent people being hit by stray bullets. The police and doctors did not arrive until 10 minutes after the firefight between the two gangs ended. I see, let's go together tonight. Looking at the gangsters' unscrupulous behavior, Gwen naturally knew the seriousness of the situation. After all, her combat uniform could not withstand bullets like Peter's. For her own safety, she would act with Peter at night. Moreover, the combination of boyfriend and girlfriend superheroes seems to be pretty good, but she doesn't know when this idiot Peter will confess to her. She has shown it so obviously, but this idiot seems to not understand at all. Does it mean that she, as a girl, should confess to him? Thinking of this, Gwen looked at Peter with extremely resentful eyes. Peter shuddered subconsciously when Gwen looked at him in this way. He felt confused in his heart, wondering why Gwen looked at him in this way. By the way, Gwen, this is for you. Peter suddenly thought of something, and with a thought, he took out 2 black hole grenades from the system space and handed them to Gwen. Gwen looked at the thing Peter handed over, which looked like it was made up of a bunch of miscellaneous parts, and didn't understand what it was. Could it be a decoration like a figurine made by Peter? What is this, Peter? Peter introduced it to Gwen. This is a black hole grenade. Gwen, throw it when you are in danger. It can create a temporary black hole and suck all the surrounding objects into the black hole. What? This thing is so dangerous. Gwen was shocked after listening to Peter's introduction. Her hands shook and she almost dropped the black hole grenade on the ground. Frightened, Gwen hurriedly placed the black hole grenade carefully on the table. Although Gwen believed what Peter said, she still had some doubts about whether such a simple thing could produce a black hole. After all, this bomb is made up of a bunch of messy parts, and it might explode if it is accidentally bumped into. First of all, Gwen is still skeptical about the safety of this thing. Peter looked at Gwen and explained with a smile, "Don't worry, Gwen. This thing is very safe. It won't explode unless the detonation button is pressed. After he finished speaking, Peter was afraid that Gwen would not believe him, so he knocked hard on the black hole grenade with his hands, making a series of ping-pong sounds, which made Gwen, who was watching from the side, frightened. Okay, Peter, I get it. You don't have to demonstrate. Gwen hurriedly put away the 2 black hole grenades. She was afraid that Peter would come again and hit the 2 black hole grenades, and her little heart wouldn't be able to bear it. Peter didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw Gwen carefully put away the black hole grenade. At least Gwen had more confidence in her own skills. After all, what she was dealing with was science. Gwen stayed in Peter's room for a while and then went back to her own home. After all, her parents had gone to work and she still had 2 naughty little kids to take care of. If she was away for too long, she didn't know what kind of mess the house would become. Peter, I'll come to see you in the evening. I'll go back first. Gwen said goodbye to Peter and opened the door and walked out. Peter waved at Gwen and said, okay, see you tonight. After Gwen left, Peter opened the map of Afghanistan again. Just now, you reminded him that she had found Tony's location, but Peter did not check it because Gwen was there. Now that Gwen is gone, Peter naturally wants to see where Tony's current location is. After clicking on the map, the location where Tony was kidnapped has been marked on the map. It is in a valley in the center of the desert. The 10 rings used camouflage cloth to cover up the easily exposed places, so it cannot be discovered unless you look closely. This is also the reason why the US military has been searching for Tony's whereabouts during this period, but there is no news at all. Because the US military was searching from the air using helicopters, they naturally could not find the 10 Rings base in the valley, nor could they find Tony's location. After determining the location of the 10 Rings base, Peter switched to the perspective of the Hive drone, and saw Tony in the cave, with disheveled hair and a scruffy face, and wearing a tattered and dirty linen shirt. Tony now looks like a refugee, and doesn't look like the CEO of Stark Group and the former playboy at all. Tony was eating at this time. When Peter saw what Tony was eating, he almost vomited. It can be said that the environment really changed people. What Tony ate was just a lump of paste. You couldn't tell what it was made of. Looking at Tony's expression, you could tell it didn't taste very good. It looks like even pigs eat better than Tony. Peter also understood why this kidnapping made Tony seem like a different person. Anyone who experienced this kind of thing would grow a lot. After patrolling the cave where Tony was imprisoned, Peter found that Tony had already drawn the blueprints of Markai, and the electromagnet on his chest was replaced with a first-generation miniature arc reactor. However, Peter did not see the parts of Markai. It seemed that Tony had not started to manufacture Markai yet. So, he did not need to rush to rescue Tony and could wait for a while. Chapter 37, ch 34. After Kingpin's death. After taking a look at Tony's living environment, Peter shook his head and turned off the video. The more he watched, the more he felt sorry for Tony. It seemed that Tony was going to suffer a lot during this period of time. After turning off the video, Peter asked you to always pay attention to the situation on Tony's side. Unless Tony or Yinsen were in danger of life, there was no need to interfere, just observe. Note, it's not Ethan but Yinsen who helped Tony in making his Mark I. After dinner at night, Peter lay on the bed, browsing his phone and waiting for Gwen to come and call him. Before long, the window was opened and Gwen poked her head in from the window. Peter, let's go. Okay. Peter turned over and sat up in bed, summoned the data knife with a thought, and pressed the button. The pilot armor appeared on Peter's body. After putting on the pilot armor, Peter and Gwen jumped down from the second floor together. After a while, Gwen and Peter arrived at Hell's Kitchen. When they arrived at Hell's Kitchen, they were surprised to see the situation here. At this time, gunshots rang out in Hell's Kitchen, and gang members were everywhere fighting for the position of the top gang. It can be said that there was no one else on the entire street except those gang members. Gwen covered her mouth in surprise at the scene and said, This is too crazy. Indeed, it feels like they have gone mad and are bloodthirsty. Peter could see crazy looks on the faces of the gang members. Their eyes had all turned blood red. They were completely crazy. At this moment, Peter finally understood why even the New York police were unwilling to intervene in Hell's Kitchen. The firepower of the gangsters that Peter had seen so far was much stronger than that of the police. Peter even saw someone take out an RPG. If he had not been shot dead just after he stood up, he might have fired it directly. It must be said that the United States is a country that is too free. With the equipment these gangs have, they can fight a small war in some poor countries. In free America, there are gunfights every day. This is not said for nothing. Peter, I'm going to stop them. You stay here and hold the fort for me. Gwen jumped down from the roof as soon as she finished speaking, and continuously shot spider silk in the air towards the gangsters around her. Each strand of spider silk accurately hit the hands of those gangsters, making it impossible for them to continue their attack. When Gwen landed on the ground, she saw that the gangsters' hands were all tied up by spider silk. Looking at her masterpiece, Gwen clapped her hands with satisfaction and gave Peter on the roof a thumbs up proudly. Peter on the roof looked at Gwen helplessly, his hand brushed across his waist and a smart pistol appeared in his hand. Peter pulled the trigger without even looking at it. As the gunshot rang out, a gangster who had broken free from the spider silk and wanted to attack Gwen with a pistol in his hand fell down. Peter jumped down from the roof and said helplessly, Gwen, I know you have spider sense, but even so you should always pay attention to your surroundings. You can't pin your hopes on your spider sense. If your spider sense fails, you will be in danger. Peter was not joking. Spider-Man's spider sense is not omnipotent. The most obvious example is Holland's version of the spider sense, which is sometimes effective and sometimes not, and is even jokingly called Peter Tingle. I understand. I will pay attention next time. Gwen humbly accepted Peter's lessons. Although Gwen has not encountered a situation where her spider sense fails so far, she would be in danger if her spider sense really fails one day. Seeing that Gwen humbly accepted his suggestion, Peter smiled, and then said to you, send a message to the police and ask them to take these gangsters away. I understand, but Peter, there's a high probability that the New York police won't come. The police issued a notice this morning saying that there will be gang fights in the Hell's Kitchen area in the near future, and asked ordinary people not to enter the Hell's Kitchen area. As you spoke, she showed Peter the news footage of the New York Police Department that morning. After hearing what you said and looking at the police notification video in front of him, Peter fell silent. The US police really adopt a laissez-faire policy towards Hell's Kitchen. As long as they fight freely in the Hell's Kitchen, it's okay even if they fight to the death. Anyway, for the US police, those who die are gangsters, and it would be best if all of them die. Gwen, who was standing nearby, naturally heard the conversation between Peter and Yui. She felt a little embarrassed when she heard what you said. After all, her father was the commissioner of the New York City Police Department. Since the police don't care about them, why should they care so much? Anyway, Gwen and Peter are here to do good deeds and there is nothing in return. Gwen really didn't get any rewards. She became a superhero just because of her passion, but Peter still has some scientific points to gain. Forget it, let's just ignore them. Their legs aren't tied up anyway. Gwen, let's go. Then Gwen and Peter left. After they left, the gangsters immediately fled in all directions. After all, their hands were tied up by the spider silk and they couldn't fight even if they wanted to. In addition, they have to go back and inform their boss about now it should be called Iron Pilot and Ghost Spider that they have reappeared. The main one is Iron Pilot. After all, Ghost Spider don't kill people. At most, she will tie people up with spider silk and then notify the police. After staying in the detention center for a few days, they will be a brave man again when they come out. But that Iron Pilot is different. He is a vicious guy. He has never shown mercy since his debut. If you can survive in his hands, you can buy a lottery ticket. And according to the rumors circulating among their gangs, it was this Iron Pilot who killed Kingpin last night. Their boss was almost scared to death when they saw the huge headless body in the news in the morning. 2 hours later, Gwen sat on the eaves of a tall building. She took off her hood and enjoyed the breeze blowing in her face. She reached out to take the handkerchief handed to her by Peter and wiped the sweat from her forehead. Peter, sometimes I really feel like you have a four-dimensional pocket just like Doraemon. I feel like I won't be surprised no matter what you suddenly take out in the future. Gwen just saw with her own eyes that Peter had nothing in his hand, and then in the blink of an eye a handkerchief appeared in his hand, just like a magic trick. Peter smiled without saying anything, then took out 2 cups of milk tea from the system space, one for himself and one for Gwen. Peter thought that this system space was so convenient. It was just like a portable space. In particular, his system space had no size limit. Peter put a little of everything in the system space and could take it out whenever he wanted. If Peter feels like cosplaying the famous scene Eat Me, Steamroller from JoJo one day, there would be no problem. Chapter 38, ch 35. Going to Afghanistan? 2 months passed quickly. During these 2 months, with the efforts of Peter and Gwen, Hell's Kitchen has returned to its former tranquility. Because so many people died in gang fights, Hell's Kitchen was even safer before Kingpin's death. The New York City police are not idiots. They took advantage of the weakened power of the Hell's Kitchen gang to intervene, and have recently begun to enforce the law in Hell's Kitchen. Peter believes it is only a matter of time before Hell's Kitchen becomes the same as other neighborhoods. It is worth mentioning that because Peter and Gwen have been working hard to maintain law and order in Hell's Kitchen in the past 2 months and have successfully allowed the New York City police to be stationed in Hell's Kitchen, the police have become more favorable towards the two. Gwen also told Peter that her father actually praised Ghost Spider and Iron Pilot during dinner, saying that it was because of the two of them that the police were successfully stationed in Hell's Kitchen, and that the people above and the public also praised them. Lying on the bed, Peter recalled what happened in the past 2 months, opened his eyes and sat up. The biggest gain for him in the past 2 months was that Gwen was much happier about the changes in her father's attitude towards Ghost Spider. Just then, Yu's voice sounded in Peter's ears. Peter, your flight is almost up, we should leave now. The car that's waiting for you is already parked outside your house. Okay, I'll go out right away. Peter immediately got up and walked out the door after hearing Yu's voice. After saying goodbye to Uncle Ben and Aunt May, he left home. Peter had already found an excuse for his trip to Afghanistan. He used the name of Umbrella Corporation to send an invitation, saying that they invited him to visit the company for a few days. Uncle Ben and Aunt May were very happy to see the request for a visit from Umbrella Corporation. After all, Umbrella Corporation has become very famous in recent times. Even they themselves are using Umbrella Corporation's voice assistant. Without any hesitation, they directly agreed to Peter's visit. After coming out of the house, Peter saw a black car parked in front of his house. Peter got into the black car directly. When the driver saw Peter get in, he asked for his name. After confirming that it was correct, he started the car and drove towards the airport. After arriving at the airport half an hour later, Peter took his ticket and followed the instructions to the VIP channel to board the plane. After all, Peter is now a billionaire, so he doesn't need to save money when traveling. Why should he squeeze into economy class when he can sit in first class? After getting on the plane, Peter closed his eyes and rested. He kept his eyes closed and rested except for eating and going to the toilet. After all, there were no mobile games at this time, and there was no other way to kill time on the plane except reading magazines, so the time passed fastest when sleeping. 12 hours later, after a turbulence, the plane landed at the airport in Afghanistan. After leaving the airport, Peter directly found an empty place and released the SUV that had been prepared long ago from the system space, and then drove the SUV towards the place where the Ten Rings gang imprisoned Tony. Since the Ten Rings gang's base was located in the center of the desert, even though Peter had an off-road vehicle and a navigation system, it still took him almost a day and a night to reach the base. Peter parked the SUV when it was about 10 kilometers away from the base. If he continued to drive forward, he would be discovered by the enemy, and the SUV would probably be lost. Although the price of this off-road vehicle is not high for Peter now, it is shameful to waste it like this. Who knows, he may be able to use it again someday? Peter, Tony Stark has already started assembling the Markai. You need to hurry up, or he will be discovered by the Ten Rings soon. Peter had just put on the pilot armor when Yu's voice rang in his ears and the scene in the cave appeared in front of Peter. Looking at the picture in which Yinsen was assembling Markai onto Tony bit by bit according to the blueprint, Peter knew that he should take action. If he continued according to the original instructions, Yinsen would be in danger. Tony has already started assembling the Mark I. It seems I have to hurry up, otherwise Yinsen will die like in the original story, and then I won't have the new suit I wanted for Gwen. Come out, Legion Titan? As Peter finished speaking, a blue wormhole with a diameter of 10 meters appeared in front of him. The next second, a Legion Titan fell from the wormhole and slammed heavily into the sand, raising a cloud of dust. The Legion Titan also made a big hole in the sand. Fortunately, Peter was protected by the pilot armor, otherwise he would definitely have a mouthful of sand. Sure enough, the desert is full of troubles, especially for a heavy mecha like the Titan. Peter looked at the Legion Titan in the pit with helplessness on his face. He randomly jumped to the head of the Legion Titan, opened the hatch and entered the cab. After the mental link was completed, Peter controlled the Legion Titan to jump out of the sand pit, and then ran towards the cave in front of him. The landing of the Legion Titan made such a loud noise that it was impossible to hide it from the people of the Ten Rings. Soon the news of the Legion Titan's invasion was known to the entire Ten Rings. Except for the few people who were necessary to guard Tony, everyone else in the valley took up their weapons and went to attack the Legion Titan. Naturally, Peter could not hide these movements from Ten Rings. Peter had a complete view of the Ten Rings deployment, and he knew exactly where the heavy firepower and missiles were deployed. His eyes twitched when he saw that the Ten Rings actually pulled up the anti-tank missiles. These anti-tank missiles were all products of the Stark Group, and their power was completely different from that of other arms companies. Peter didn't dare to bet whether the Legion Titan could take on these anti-tank missiles. To be on the safe side, he decided to sacrifice a few honeycomb drones to destroy them. Use the Hive drone to destroy those missiles that threaten the Legion Titan. Okay, Peter, I'll destroy those anti-tank missiles right away. A few seconds after Yu's voice was heard, a violent explosion occurred on the top of the mountain in the valley. This explosion was really a chain reaction caused by the self-detonation of the honeycomb drone and the anti-tank missiles. Although these anti-tank missiles have safety devices, they generally will not explode. But it was useless to Yu, because she knew where to self-destruct so that the anti-tank missiles would explode directly, so she easily got rid of those anti-tank missiles. Seeing the explosion at the location where the anti-tank missiles were deployed on the top of the mountain, the bald leader of the Ten Rings gang immediately looked at his men and shouted, "What happened? Why did an explosion occur on the top of the mountain? Could it be that the enemy has sneaked in? Send someone to check what's going on right now." Chapter 39, ch 36. Saving Tony? Yes, boss. Upon hearing the order from their boss, a dozen terrorists immediately ran along the trail towards the top of the mountain with guns in hand. Just after a dozen terrorists left, Peter drove the Legion Titan closer quickly, and soon he was less than 1 kilometer away from the valley entrance. Seeing that the Legion Titan was so close, the bald boss took the RPG from the man beside him, took aim and pulled the trigger. The RPG bullet shot towards the Legion Titan with a long white tail flame. Boom! A few seconds later, the RPG warhead hit the Legion Titan directly and accurately, causing a fireball to rise. When the fireball dissipated, there was only a black area where the Legion Titan was hit, and no other damage was caused. You know, even if the Flame Titan takes a head-on hit with the RPG, it won't be a big problem, let alone the Legion Titan whose armor is thicker than the Flame Titan. This RPG is just a tickle to the Legion Titan. Peter originally wanted to get closer before opening fire, but since they attacked first, he would show no mercy. With a thought, Peter controlled the Legion Titan to raise the Hunter cannon in his hand. Although it was called a cannon, it was actually a mecha version of a Gatling gun. However, the bullets, which were almost the same size as a human, could be called cannonballs. Activate the gun shield. It's time for me to fight back. A blue transparent shield about the same size as the Legion Titan was released from the Hunter cannon. This blue shield protected the Legion Titan firmly. Then the barrel of the hunter cannon began to rotate, and bullets were continuously fired to form an orange-red fire snake that shot towards the terrorists at the entrance of the valley. In just a few seconds, a layer of golden bullet casings accumulated under Peter's feet, which showed how fast the firing rate of the hunter cannon was. Originally, the bald boss gathered all his strength at the entrance and wanted to fight Peter, fantasizing that if he could take down the mecha, he might be able to occupy the government and bring down the current president. However, when the Legion Titan opened fire, he realized that he was too naive. This terrifying firepower was simply beyond their ability to block. In just a few seconds, the defense line they had set up was completely destroyed. At this time, the entrance to the valley was filled with blood-red dust and broken limbs were everywhere. The bald boss and his men who had survived by chance had already dropped their weapons and ran into the valley, planning to reorganize an attack and launch an attack after the mecha entered the valley. Half a minute later, after he had fired all the bullets in the magazine, Peter stopped. Looking at the valley entrance where there was no movement at all, Peter directly controlled the Legion Titan and walked over. After this round of attack, most of the terrorists had been eliminated by him, and those who survived by chance had all retreated into the valley. At that moment, in the cave where Tony was imprisoned, Tony shook his head to shake off all the dust that had just fallen on his head. At the same time, he spat a few times to spit out the dust that had just fallen into his mouth. Looking at the cave ceiling that shook from time to time, Tony looked at Yinsen with a puzzled look on his face. Yinsen, what's going on? Is it an earthquake? Yinsen was also confused by the inexplicable vibration. The base of the Ten Rings gang was not in an earthquake zone, so earthquakes should not occur. Moreover, he seemed to hear a series of explosions with the vibration just now. Could it be that someone was attacking? But no matter which possibility it is not important to the two of them now. The most urgent task now is to quickly input Tony's Mark I program and successfully start it. This iron shell is the hope for the two of them to escape from here. Yinsen pressed the buttons in order as Tony had taught him, and replied, "It shouldn't be an earthquake. This place is not in an earthquake zone. I seemed to hear an explosion just now. Someone must have discovered the base of the Ten Rings gang, so most probably a fight broke out." Just as Yinsen finished speaking, two terrorists suddenly came to the door, opened the observation window of the iron door and looked inside. They only saw Yinsen but not Tony, so they immediately became anxious, banged on the iron door and shouted at Yinsen. Tony's heart tightened when he heard the voice of the terrorists outside the door. He looked at the progress bar on the computer screen that was about to finish. He just needed to wait a while and the program would be completed. Then his suit would be able to move. All he had to do was gain a little bit of time. So Tony said to Yinsen anxiously, "Ethan, hurry up and say something to them to gain the time. They are speaking Hungarian, I don't speak Hungarian." Yinsen was speechless about this. He knew many languages, but the terrorist who came happened to be a terrorist who spoke Hungarian, a language he didn't know. Hearing the terrorist's anxious voice, Tony said to Yinsen, "Tell them what you know, or they will break the door." "Okay." Yinsen looked at Tony helplessly, then shouted Hungarian words to the two terrorists outside the door, which he didn't even understand. Unexpectedly, the two terrorists outside the door did not calm down after hearing Yinsen's words, but became even more violent. When they tried to open the door and found it useless, they simply used the butts of their guns to hit the door and began to force it open. Boom! A few seconds later, the door was knocked open by the terrorists. The moment the door was knocked open, it directly triggered the explosives behind the door, and an explosion sounded. Then the heavy iron door flew out under the power of the bomb and hit the two terrorists heavily, killing them on the spot. The explosion made Tony's ears buzz. As Tony was fixed on the rack, he couldn't see the situation of the two terrorists at all. He could only ask Yinsen, what's the situation? Yinsen carefully leaned his head out to take a look, only to see that the two terrorists were pinned down by the heavy iron door with only their heads sticking out. The exposed heads were tightly closed on both sides, bleeding strangely, and there was no movement at all. They're both dead. After he finished speaking, Yinsen glanced at the progress bar on the computer screen. He didn't know how long it would take to complete. With such a big noise here, someone would definitely come over soon. Yinsen had to buy time for Tony. "Tony, I'll go buy you some time," Yinsen said to Tony, then ran to the door, picked up the AK-47 on the ground and ran along the passage, completely ignoring Tony's shouts behind him. Chapter 40, ch. 37. "I am here to save you?" Tony looked at Yinsen's departing back and shouted, "Damn it! Yinsen, come back, I can finish them right away, you don't need to risk your life." If Tony wasn't wearing Mark I and couldn't move until the program was entered, he would definitely stop Yinsen. Fortunately for Tony, the situation now is different from that in the original. Those two terrorists are the only ones left to guard Tony and Yinsen. All the others went to resist Peter, so Yinsen did not encounter any terrorists along the way. This abnormal situation made Yinsen feel inexplicably uneasy. He knew in his heart that the terrorists must have encountered some difficult situation, otherwise why didn't he see anyone along the way? Yinsen guessed that this incident was probably related to the previous vibration of the cave and the explosion he had vaguely heard before. However, in order to prevent any terrorists from suddenly coming back, Yinsen did not go back directly, but was ambushed at a corner with a gun. As long as any terrorists came back, Yinsen could catch them off guard and buy enough time for Tony. But what Yinsen didn't know was that the terrorists no longer cared about him and Tony. They were now thinking about how they could survive. because at this time Peter was outside controlling the Legion Titan and walked into the valley. As soon as he entered the valley, the terrorists launched a fierce attack on the Legion Titan, and even 3 or 4 anti-tank missiles were mixed in and shot at the Legion Titan. For a moment, the smoke formed by the missile explosion directly enveloped the Legion Titan. However, the bald boss did not believe that the Legion Titan could be solved so easily, so he ordered his men to continue attacking the smoke. Of course Peter would not stand there and get beaten in vain. In fact, the attacks of those terrorists did not cause any damage to the Legion Titan at all. Even its health bar did not drop at all. From the beginning, all the attacks were blocked by the gun shield released by the Hunter Cannon. Activate the Core of Wisdom. Peter activated the Legion Titan's ultimate move with a thought. Suddenly, countless boxes appeared in Peter's sight, and each box represented an enemy. Peter aimed the gun at the boxes and pulled the trigger, and the bullet flew out in the air in a flaming snake. The intelligence core of the Legion Titan does not only display the enemy's position, but also allows the fired bullets to track the target like a smart pistol. However, the difference is that the bullets fired by the Legion Titan can only be fine-tuned, not as abnormal as the right-angle turn of the smart pistol. But even so, it is already very powerful. Squeak. A minute later, as the magazine was empty, the barrel of the Hunter Cannon slowly stopped. The front end of the muzzle turned red due to continuous shooting. Wisps of white smoke slowly rose and finally dissipated in the air. Although there was no box in Peter's sight now, for the sake of safety, Peter still asked, "Are there any terrorists alive?" You controlled the Hive drone to patrol the valley and then told Peter the results. Peter, after investigation, all the terrorists have been eliminated. In addition, Tony is about to drive the Mark I out of the cave. Okay. After listening to what you said, Peter nodded and drove the Titan mecha towards the entrance of the cave. When they arrived at the exit of the cave, Peter opened the cockpit and jumped off the Legion Titan, leaning against the Legion Titan's legs and waiting for Tony and Yinsen to come out. Before long, Peter felt a regular vibration coming from the ground. Then, a crude mecha, almost 2 to 3 meters high, welded together from many steel plates of different sizes, with many joints, hydraulic parts, and transmission devices exposed, walked out of the cave stiffly step by step. Tony drove the Mark I out of the cave, raised his arms and prepared to fire at any time. Tony originally thought that he would face a fierce attack from terrorists as soon as he came out, but he didn't expect to see a man who would never appear in Afghanistan. The person Tony saw was naturally Peter wearing the pilot armor. "It's you, super soldier? Are you in league with the 10 Rings?" Apart from this, Tony couldn't understand why the super soldier who was originally in New York appeared in Afghanistan. Tony looked at Peter vigilantly under his helmet, opened the cover of the micro-missile in his left hand and aimed at Peter. As long as Peter made any unusual movement, Tony would launch the micro-missile without hesitation. Peter, who was targeted by Tony with a micro-missile, showed no sign of strangeness on his face. He pointed around and asked Tony to look. "Big shit, I have no ill will towards you, otherwise I wouldn't have come to save you. Look around you." Yinsen, who was behind Tony, looked around and said to Tony, "It seems that he really came to save us. All those terrorists are." Yinsen suddenly stopped talking halfway because he couldn't bear the sight of broken limbs and arms everywhere and he bent over and vomited on the spot. Tony was puzzled when he heard Yinsen's words, so he looked around. He saw broken limbs everywhere in the valley, and there was not a single intact body in sight. Although Tony, as an arms dealer, had seen many bloody scenes, this was the first time he had seen such a bloody scene. His face was very pale under the helmet, and he tried hard not to vomit. After all, this mecha is just welded together with a pile of scrap metal. If I really spit it out, it might just go all over my face, or it might all flow onto my body. When Tony thought of this scene, he laughed and swallowed the vomit that was about to reach his throat. "I believe you are here to save me, but this is too bloody." Tony glanced at the bloody scene again and finally couldn't help but vomit. Hearing the sound of Tony vomiting, Peter and Yinsen shuddered subconsciously, took a few steps back, and looked at Tony with disgust. Tony was also very devastated at this time. Just as he expected, the vomit was all over his face. Tony could even smell the scent of today's breakfast. Because the armor was so leaky, Tony couldn't even take off the helmet himself, or even disassemble it. Tony in the helmet looked up at the sun with a look of despair on his face, and shouted loudly in despair, "Help! I'm not clean anymore." Chapter 41, ch. 38. Like father and son, when Tony set up Mark I, he didn't consider the disassembly issue at all. He only considered the ease of installation, defense, and attack power. This resulted in Yinsen spending a full half-hour using a variety of tools before he finally dismantled all of the Mark I suit on Tony. Yinsen threw the mask in his hand away in disgust, looked at Tony, whose face was still stained with vomit, and said with disgust, "Tony, stay away from me, don't come near me." As he spoke, Yinsen took several steps back and stopped when he was about 3 or 4 meters away from Tony. Tony didn't care about Yinsen's words, because the most urgent thing now was to clean the vomit off his face as soon as possible. The temperature in Afghanistan was already high, and the vomit stayed on his face for more than half an hour. Tony could feel that a lot of it had already formed scabs. Tony breathed a sigh of relief after wiping the vomit off his face, but he could still smell the smell of vomit. Tony made up his mind to take a good bath. He had not taken a bath at all during the months he was kidnapped by the 10 Rings. He felt that the dirt on his body had already scabbed over. Super Soldier. Tony just opened his mouth to ask Super Soldier if he could contact the nearby US military, because since he came here to save him, there must be a way to take him away from here. However, when Tony just shouted out Peter's title, he was rudely interrupted by Peter. Don't call me the Super Soldier, that ridiculous title. I have a new name now, Iron Pilot. Big shit, remember that. Hearing Peter calling him big shit, Tony was stunned for a moment and then said loudly, Big shit? My name is not Big shit, my name is Tony Stark. This is because his life is still in Iron Pilot's hands, so Tony has restrained himself a lot. Otherwise, with Tony's character, how could he just be like this? In response to Tony's correction, Peter's reaction was I know, but I won't change. He liked seeing him look angry but helpless. Okay, I got it. I had already contacted the US military when I came here, and I'm almost at the designated location. By the way, when the US troops arrive later, don't tell them that I saved you. As for how you escaped, just make up a random excuse. As soon as he finished speaking, Peter threw a cell phone to Tony. The phone had already marked the location that Peter had sent to the US military. As for why they didn't let the US military come directly to this valley, the reason is very simple. It was to prevent the US military from seeing the bloody mess and trying to get to the bottom of the matter. Another thing is that he is afraid that after the US military arrives, they will clean up the scene and take away the wreckage of Mark I. Wouldn't that mean there will be no Iron Man later? After throwing the phone to Tony, Peter didn't give him a chance to speak. He went straight into the cockpit of the Legion Titan and drove the Legion Titan away from the valley. When the Legion Titan disappeared from sight, Tony turned around and looked at the parts of Mark I on the ground. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind. He must build a more powerful armor when he returns. Compared to bulky mechas, Tony prefers armor that can be worn at any time to protect himself. In Tony's opinion, that kind of bulky guy has no aesthetic appeal at all. In Tony's opinion, being strong is not the most important thing, being handsome is the most important thing. Tony is so showy at this moment, otherwise he would not have painted the subsequent Mark suit in that eye-catching red and gold color. Peter, who had already left, had no idea what Tony was thinking, otherwise he would have asked Tony to take a closer look. How could the Titan not have any aesthetic appeal at all? You know, mecha is the romance of men. After Peter left, Tony and Yinsen took their phones and walked to the location above. Fortunately, this location was not too far from the valley, otherwise it was very likely that Tony and Ethan would not have died at the hands of the terrorists, but would have died of dehydration in the desert. Not long after the two arrived at the designated location, the military came there directly. After getting on the helicopter, Tony finally relaxed completely. Looking at Tony who was drinking water like a beggar on the plane, Rhodes said, Tony, promise me that you will come with me in the future and don't ride in your little pickup truck anymore. Tony crushed the empty water bottle and said to Rhodes, don't worry, this won't happen again. Rhodes didn't understand what Tony meant. He just thought that Tony would go back with him in a helicopter. He never imagined that Tony was planning to go back and directly shut down the weapons department of Stark Group. After all, he did not die at the hands of terrorists, but almost died at the hands of weapons he made with his own hands. This is really a great irony. Thinking of this, Tony touched the miniature arc reactor on his chest that was emitting blue light. Meanwhile, Peter was driving his SUV towards the airport, and said you, sell all your stocks as soon as the news of Tony's rescue comes out. Make sure you sell them all before Tony holds a press conference. Okay, Peter, I got it. Yu's sweet voice rang in Peter's ears. 2 days later, Peter had just walked out of the bathroom after taking a shower and sat next to Uncle Ben, watching the TV news with a smile on his face. At this time, the TV news was reporting that Tony had been rescued and successfully landed in New York City, and a press conference was about to be held. Uncle Ben sighed while watching the news on TV. This Tony Stark is so lucky. I thought he was dead after hearing no news for so long, but I didn't expect he was still alive. Peter smiled and replied to Uncle Ben, Uncle Ben, this may be what the ancient country in the East calls the scourge that will last for 1,000 years. That's true. Peter, can you tell me what interesting things you encountered when you visited the Umbrella Corporation? Uncle Ben nodded slightly in agreement, and then started chatting with Peter as if he was just chatting about family matters. Although Peter had never been to Umbrella, it was still very easy for him to make up stories about what the company looked like. He simply described what those technology companies in his previous life were like, and then made up some interesting stories. After all, Peter was a novelist before he traveled through time, so it was very easy for him to make up such a short story. Although Peter was a blanket writer in his previous life, it does not affect this. So Peter talked and Uncle Ben listened to Peter with a faint smile on his face, and occasionally expressed his thoughts. For a moment, the uncle and nephew were like father and son, but in Peter's heart, he had already regarded Uncle Ben as his own father, and to Uncle Ben, Peter was like his own son.